As the slide says, our program today is sponsored by Otsuka. And Kelly, would you like to take a couple of minutes and talk about Otsuka and the resources that you all offer?
Absolutely, would love to. You guys can hear me. I'm sorry, I'm at a conference in Washington, D.C., so I'm in a kind of a networking room and on my AirPods, so y'all can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So my name is Kelly Struther, and I lead the state government affairs and advocacy function covering California. Otsuka America Pharmaceutical is a US-based subsidiary of a larger Otsuka pharmaceutical company based out of Japan. And our corporate philosophy is Otsuka people creating new products for better health worldwide. And so we are deeply involved in the neuroscience space, nephrology, and immunology. But one of the things that I'm so proud of is that our commitment, we have a strong commitment to the patient, but also for those who care for the patients. And we really want to use the caregiver standpoint to define our path forward. We want to uplift familial caregivers and those who live with mental health conditions and brain diseases. We're committed to caregivers because we recognize they're not only a very important stakeholder in the patient's wellness journey, but that caregivers also have needs, and those needs often get overlooked. So we have really spent the past couple of years building out our caregiver commitment as well as some resources. So I'm particularly proud of a recent study that we sponsored with Columbia Mailman School of Public Health, and found that caregiving induced declines in health can contribute to an estimated $28.3 billion annually in healthcare costs. And so it is a profound economic impact. And then finally, we've put together not only these research reports, but also some resources, and I'll make sure that those get sent out to you. And one particular resource that we have put together is a small little animated video that talks about Alzheimer's and dementia, and how it like a tool that you could use with children, and then also a workbook that supports those conversations. So those will be coming to you after the webinar today, but I'm just honored to be able to help sponsor this discussion, and look forward to ongoing, any ways that we can continue to support people like you that do the hard work of caregiving.
Thank you, Kelly. That's just really great. We're so honored to partner with your organization, and the resources that I've seen on your website are really great. And I'll refer to those toward the end of our time today. Kelly, the research report on healthcare costs, is that on your website as well, or is that something you'll send to us?
I do believe there's a link on the website, but I will make sure that it comes through. I'll send it to Lauren so that when she does any follow-up with the attendees today, that there'll be an easy way to access that as well.
That's great. I would really like to read that. The impact on caregivers, as you mentioned, is huge, and the value of family and friends who are providing unpaid care is huge, and the impact for the benefit of the person who's living with whether it's Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia can be so great. And there are so many resources that can help guide, educate, support. And I'll talk more about those again toward the end. But they're just tremendous value in family and friend caregivers. And so that's a big part of what Alzheimer's Orange County and our purpose, our role in our community is to support caregivers and everybody who's affected by Alzheimer's and all of the different causes of dementia. So thanks again, Kelly. Your work really and your partnership really makes a difference.
Thank you.
All right. Let me go to my next slide and tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Ben Allen. I am a programs and education specialist at Alzheimer's Orange County. And I've been involved in this work for about 13 years, I think. And I got started when my wife, Judy, my late wife, um, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and that was back in 2009. Judy had a long, slow progression, decline through all of the stages and phases and challenges of Alzheimer's disease. Um, and when I mention challenges, I also want to emphasize joys. There were so many times that we experienced incredible joy, and just a richness of relationship um, that obviously changed through that progression. And yet, one of the things that we always want to emphasize is that there is life. There is there are so many opportunities um, for fulfilling connections, whether it's somebody in our family, whether it's spouse, aging parent, children, grandchildren, which is what we're talking about today, and really not limited to any relationship, because the principles that we talk about um, in the context of communicating. How do we communicate? How do we connect with the person we're caring for? Apply to all relationships, um, even our everyday, normal, day-to-day life can benefit through the principles that we talk about in communication. So I hope you'll look at and consider what we're talking about today in a bigger context. Yes, we're going to focus on grandchildren, yet there's so much we can do to expand our awareness of opportunities. And as illustrated in this particular image, let me talk about the day this picture was taken, which was probably about 8 years ago at this point. Um, Judy was in late stage of Alzheimer's. She had been living in a long-term care community for people with dementia for a couple of years at this point. Um, and on this day, there was live music in the community where she was living, and those were the best. We talk about the best of times and the worst of times, and almost every day had both. But when there was live music, those were the best of times. Judy might be sleeping when a musician came in and set up and started um, playing an instrument, singing, and and I would just start tapping the beat on her leg or on the arm of her chair, and she would slowly just kind of rouse and sit up, and before she even opened her eyes, this smile would bloom on her face. Music just touched her. And and in all of the things that we talk about, we can find ways, we can find specific examples of activities, of ways to engage and connect. And when we connect with the person we're caring for, we just enrich our experience for everybody, even people who aren't related to us. There was a day where um, I was reading to Judy, and she was so engrossed. She was just leaning in next to me, to hear the story I was reading. And there was another family in the room who observed this scene and took a picture of it and sent it to me. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful time. So whatever that activity is that we resonate with, it may be music, it may be reading aloud, it may be creating art, and we'll talk about some of those opportunities. We find a way to connect, even when that person who's living with some form of dementia is losing the ability to communicate verbally, um, or at least to express themselves. They may still have receptive language to understand what we're saying if we adjust how we approach our expression, our expressive language. So we make adjustments, but we find something that everybody resonates with. And we see those times like I saw on that day where there was music. I got her on her feet. I wrapped my arm around her and we just started swaying to the music. And that was all. There were no dance steps that we used to have, but we had a connection that expressed our relationship, um, that was beyond words. So I'll leave it at that. It was a beautiful time, and my hope is that you will find ways to have those kinds of experiences. Before I go on, I just want to say I welcome questions. At any point, if you want to unmute, speak up. If you turn on your camera, that helps me. But feel free to jump in at any point. So let's move on and talk about why this is important when it comes to communicating with grandchildren. The reality is, children notice things. They are very observant. They may not understand what they're perceiving, but they notice. And we may not realize that they notice. And we may not realize that they're being affected by what they're observing. And when we don't talk about it, when there's silence about a subject, then children especially, but everybody, will make up explanations, and they will often internalize, personalize the experience and think this is my fault. And so we want to help them through conversation understand what's going on, learn to be resilient, to adapt, to cope with the emotions that they are feeling. And so we'll talk about how we do that. If we don't address what's obvious, we might call it the elephant in the room that nobody talks about. We want to talk about it. We want to normalize it so people are comfortable. And again, this is so important for children, but it's important in every relationship. There's so much embarrassment, perhaps, stigma. Stigma is something that impacts most people when it comes to any kind of chronic condition. And a lot of people are just unwilling to expose themselves to public scrutiny. And that fear, that projection of what other people will think of me is what we call stigma. And stigma gets in the way of connection. And so we want to find ways to dismantle stigma. So that's kind of where we're going. So things that kids might or are likely to notice, that the grandparent forgetting names, dates, just the daily, how do we do things, the routines that we've always done, but things are changing. And they and others are going, whoa, this is not how we do things. What's going on here? They'll notice that the person with dementia is asking the same question over and over, and that's confusing. That there are changes in mood, there's changes in frustration. Um, let me go back for a minute, back to introducing myself. I have 3 grandchildren, and I was thinking this morning, now, how old were they when Judy started to experience symptoms that ultimately came to be diagnosed as Alzheimer's disease? So our oldest grandchild at that time was 11. The middle grandchild was 2, and the youngest was newborn. Even the newborn is going to pick up feelings from the room, the emotional climate, what's going on. Judy's frustration level at that point, and this was in 2005, it was 4 years before she was ultimately diagnosed. And we didn't understand ourselves what was going on. I was going, what? What's happening here? And Judy's trying to hold things together, to fix meals. Our youngest daughter and her family were living with us. Actually, the newborn was born in our family room with a midwife. There was so much going on emotionally. And as Judy's trying to provide for this extended family, she's struggling, and her frustration level is just going off the chart. And everybody feels that. And yet, Judy's so embarrassed, she didn't want to talk about what was going on. So kids notice that the person needs, the grandparent, let's say, needs reminders, needs help with things that we wouldn't ordinarily think help is necessary. They notice when it's difficult for the grandparent to follow conversations. They notice when the grandparent is withdrawing, that they're not engaged. Maybe they're sleeping all the time, which is new. All of these things, the grandchildren pick up what's going on, even when we may think, oh, they're not going to notice. They do. They do. And it's so much healthier to acknowledge what's going on. So as we begin to talk with grandchildren, it's important to tailor how we express ourselves so that it's appropriate to their age. And just simplistically, guidelines, ages 3 to 7, keep things simple, short, and safe. And I would even expand that retroactively. My experience, the newborn, language may not communicate, but we can communicate with the youngest through touch, through our tone of voice and our body language. And so we need to provide comfort, assurance. Ages 8 to 12, we need to be more direct, but keep it simple. It needs to be honest. Our language needs to be clear. And we need to be curious about what they're feeling. What are they observing? Obviously, from 13 up, we can have more direct and more dialogue, always keeping it respectful, be real about what we're dealing with and the challenges, and involve them more. But we tailor our language to their age. In all of the workshops that we do for caregivers, we talk about communication. And I just want to emphasize, and maybe you've been part of some of our caregiver workshops, but if you haven't, the key to communication is recognizing that the vast majority of communication comes from body language and tone of voice. Words are important, but body language and tone of voice are most important. And so how we engage with young children, we need to pay attention to our own body language and tone of voice. So let's go a little deeper in each age group. Simple and reassuring, acknowledging their concerns, their fears, listening, providing reassurance. For them, the world is concrete and literal. We can summarize that to say, if I can't see it, it's not real. But they do see it, and it is real. The challenge is that cause and effect may not be clear. And so they may come to the conclusion or wonder, did I do something wrong? Or assume, oh, grandma's confused. I must have done something wrong. So that their interpretation changes emotions and fear. And so we need to recognize that that's real for them. So 3 to 7, again, keep it simple, reassuring, acknowledge, say something. Don't keep quiet. Don't avoid acknowledging what's obvious. But say something simple like, Grandma's brain is sick, and that makes it harder for her to remember things. And I remember saying something like that to our grandchildren. Even though they had not, for the most part, occasionally they would ask, what's wrong with Grandma? And I would tell them, it's her brain. She has a disease that affects her brain and that affects her ability to communicate. It affects her ability to carry out daily activities. So things that you can say, she might say things that don't make sense, but it's not your fault. Again, providing reassurance to say, Grandpa still loves you, even if he doesn't remember your name. Marissa, you have a question?
Yes. So I kind of wanted to get maybe a little bit of advice on that topic. I have two nephews and a niece all under the age of 7. And my mom has Alzheimer's, but she's still a little bit in denial of it. Now we are thinking of saying something to her, or I mean saying something to the kids about everything. Now we part of my fear is that if we do talk to them about it, that they might bring it up with her and she might get upset about them either knowing or her denying it and not. I don't know. I just kind of I want to maybe get your advice on whether or not this should be a topic that we bring up quite yet.
And how old are they again?
7, 5, and 3.
My personal feeling is that at 7, They can certainly understand a conversation that would let them know that you are aware of changes. And I
Mhm,
think you can say that their grandmother doesn't want to talk about it.
mhm.
But again, the most important thing is acknowledge what's obvious and provide reassurance.
Okay,
And I think it's perfectly okay to say, Grandma doesn't want to talk about it yet.
okay,
I would leave the door open
okay.
that there may come a time where she's okay talking about it, but to let them know, even the 5-year-old, I think, can understand that.
Yeah, okay. Thank
She
you.
doesn't want to talk about it now, but we want you to know that yes, she's having a hard time. It's not your fault. We're all doing the best we can to help her and make her comfortable. Something like that. You'll find the words
Mhm,
that feel right to you, what's natural to you.
mhm.
Um, I keep coming back to the importance of body language. And one other thing that we talk about when it comes to effective communication, um, touch is so important. Um, in your communication with your mom, right?
Mhm.
To use gentle touch, eye contact, be at her eye level when you communicate. A gentle touch goes a long, long way um,
Okay.
to building, strengthening the connection that you have with your mom. And and so the point I want to make about communicating with children is use gentle, appropriate touch.
Okay.
Sitting side by side, arm around, whatever is natural in your relationship with uh, nephews and nieces, you said, right?
Correct. Yes.
You have to be natural based on your relationship with them.
Yeah.
Wherever you can, use touch, use open body language, smile, and comfort. And that's what we all need.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and as caregivers, we need that. We need to be in relationship with people, and I'll talk more about this later, um, who are willing to listen to the challenges that we're facing, are willing to hear our emotions, our pain, our fear, our grief. In caregiver workshops, we talk about the grief that we experience as caregivers as we see relationship changing and the kinds of things that we had always done together aren't working. We experience grief and we have to process that, and we need to be able to talk to people about that. So I hope that helps. Marissa, thank you for asking the question.
Yes, it did.
This is Sheila, and I'd just like to add one thing. When we started this journey with my dad, our youngest was 3 and our older was 4.5. And we had a lot of aggressive behavior from the 3-year-old we could not figure out. And we got him connected with a play therapist and learned, and this is not every kid, but depending on the relationship they have with your mom or with the grandparent, he was overly empathetic but didn't have the words to communicate that he was scared, noticed something was different with grandpa. And the play therapist worked wonders at helping him process those emotions as a 3-year-old. So depending on the relationship, that can be an incredible resource for families and young children.
Yes, thank you for
That's
sharing
really,
that,
really
Sheila.
great. Thank you, Sheila. Yeah. Even if they don't have the words, we can provide words that they can understand. But having a child therapist is just a great way to go. So thank you for that. Other questions before I move on? All right. So ages 8 to 12, they are curious, they're observant, they can grasp that the brain is in control, but when there's a disease of the brain, it's going to have impact, whether it's through impact on language, their memory, their ability to think, their ability just to take care of themselves, you know, what we call the activities of daily living, that there may be struggles with, dressing, eating, walking, brushing teeth, all of those basic activities, there may be struggles. And children in this age can understand that. And so we need to help them. They may not understand why, and so we can help them understand why the damage in the brain is impacting daily life. Speaking of damage in the brain, on our website, which I'll refer to later, there's a really great video about Alzheimer's disease. It's a 3-minute animated explanation of what happens in the brain. May be very helpful for children in this age group, 8 to 12, or for adults as well. It's so common with siblings who may not be around the parent and may not understand the extent of what's happening. This video can be very helpful to understand how Alzheimer's causes changes in the brain that impact everything that the brain does or should be doing, would be doing if the person were cognitively healthy. And again, especially in this age group, the more they understand, the more they're likely to be embarrassed about the kinds of things that they observe. So we want to help them recognize those changes and just be open about them, communicate about them. So a few other things, some examples of what you might say, how you might say it. You may explain that dementia is a disease that changes how the brain works. It's still pretty simple in terms of explanation, makes remembering and thinking harder. We can help. We can be patient. We can speak more slowly. We can help with reminders about how to find things, how to do things. We can acknowledge sometimes Grandpa gets upset when he's confused, but he's not angry at you. Again, you're going to find the words, these are just examples. You'll find words that feel natural to you. The key point is talk about it. One of the most difficult things in our experience was that Judy was so embarrassed that she wouldn't talk about it. And that made things just so much harder. So with older children, teenagers, they can understand dementia. You can describe it as a medical term. You can talk about the impact on emotions. Again, they may be embarrassed. They may be frustrated. They may feel guilty unnecessarily, but unless we talk about it, their emotions, they're going to go down a path with those emotions that may be completely unnecessary, and we can head that off by talking about it. Some teenagers are just going to want to help. They're going to want to know, what can I do? They're going to step in and help. Others are going to be more distant, and we need to acknowledge and accept the differences within a family. One child may react one way and another completely differently. So we just need to recognize that everybody's different. Be honest, be respectful, and help to empower them. Examples of how to talk about it. Dementia causes changes in the brain, and that affects memory, affects their behavior, affects their emotions. It's normal to feel sad, to feel anger, to feel embarrassment. You're not alone. You're not the only one who feels that. We all are challenged by these changes. You can still have a special bond. Maybe it's through music. Maybe it's through helping with meals. Or maybe it's just sitting together, being present. Teenagers can understand that. They can process it, and we can help them process it by talking about it, by listening to them, by acknowledging their confusion, their frustration, their embarrassment. So, some common questions that kids ask. Why does grandma forget my name? The 3 to 7-year-old group, like we've already said, you can say, her brain is sick. Remembering names is hard, but she still loves you. The key point is to reassure, to express love, reassurance that grandma still loves them. Did I do something to make grandpa mad? No, sweetie, it's not your fault. Grandpa's brain gets mixed up sometimes. We want to alleviate any tendency toward their jumping to a conclusion that it's their fault, that they feel guilty, they feel afraid, and just reassure, it's not your fault. Why does grandma ask the same questions over and over? Her brain can't remember she already asked. You can answer once and then change the subject. That's such an important point. We have a tendency when somebody is asking a question over and over, it's an expression of anxiety on their part. And so we tend to just answer the question the same way over and over. And when we do that, we tend to get frustrated, and that frustration begins to overflow in our tone of voice, in our body language. So the best way to handle that is what we call distract and redirect. Answer the question, acknowledge their anxiety, and then change the subject. And often it's just to look out the window and say, look at that sunset. Grandma, let's go look at the sunset. And you literally take their hand and start walking out the door. And so what we do is distract them from the obsession that they're having over whatever it is that they're frustrated with. So we distract them by directing their attention somewhere else, and then direct them to something positive, whether it's going out to look at the sunset or the sunrise or the flowers or the birds, whatever it is that will draw their attention and provide them something pleasant, something where they can appreciate beauty and experience some joy. And again, touch is so powerful. When we are anxious, when we are frustrated, overwhelmed, the touch of another person helps to diffuse that. And we can normalize repetition. We understand why, because of their confusion. And by the way, to the person with dementia, the world is a confusing and frightening place. And so once we understand that, we can accept their expressions, their frustrations, and use techniques like distract and redirect. So a more mature question, older age group, 8 to 12, is grandma dying? That's a challenging question. And so one way you can answer that is people can live with dementia for a long time. We don't know exactly what will happen, but we can help. So we balance truth. We give a truthful answer. We don't know. That's true. And in the next breath, provide reassurance. We're doing everything we can to help. So, acknowledging and supporting the children's feelings, to talk about it. Maybe use drawing, painting, writing, telling stories. Acknowledge feelings, sadness, frustration, embarrassment. When we acknowledge them, we normalize them. We can empathize. We can say something like, I know this is confusing to you. It's confusing to me too. When we acknowledge our own feelings and demonstrate that we were working through it ourselves, we are teaching to regulating emotions. And we create a safe space. I'm getting a message that my internet is intermittent. Am I freezing?
Just for a moment, it's okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jeff. It's so important to model normalization, to acknowledge and say something like, yeah, this is hard. We're all learning how to adapt. And when we have that conversation, our body language, which includes our facial expressions, our tone of voice, the use of gentle, appropriate touch, all communicates to the child normalization, regulation. To say, yeah, sometimes it's really frustrating, isn't it? In the next breath, you know what I do? I breathe. Sometimes it helps to just stop and breathe. Let's do that. Would you breathe with me? We help children by doing it ourselves, by regulating our own emotions. Breathing's powerful. Taking a moment on our own to go out and look at the sunrise, look at the sunset, look at the flowers, the birds, whatever it is, to read, to look at art, to appreciate the beauty that's all around us, helps to regulate our own emotions, and then we model it for the children in our lives. So let's talk about some activities, because one of the best things we can do for children is to help them connect with the grandparent. So just examples, looking at photo albums. Now, many of us don't have literal albums, physical albums anymore, but maybe we use a tablet with an album of photos on the tablet. That's something I did with Judy. I took an iPad and I put together a collection of photos of her life. And I had this chronological story of her life, and we would sit there and go through it together. I already talked about music, singing. For a while, Judy would sing a little bit. Sometimes all she would do would be mouth the lyrics if she knew them. She wouldn't, at least later in the progression of her Alzheimer's, she wouldn't sing at all. But in an earlier stage, a person might. Doing simple crafts, cooking, if it's appropriate. Of course, you have to determine what is a safe activity. When Judy was first evaluated, she hadn't even been diagnosed yet. The psychologist who evaluated her said at the end, okay, we can see there's a serious problem. We don't know what the cause is, but we're going to find out. And by the way, she shouldn't cook and she shouldn't drive. And I'm going, oh, okay. Here's some major changes in our life, and I need to step up my game. Cooking was not an option for her. It was not safe even then, even before her diagnosis. Reading to a grandparent, or in my case, reading to my wife was huge, was one of the best things. It was one of the best days. Creating a memory box. What does that mean? So a memory box, simplistically, is any kind of container that has the activities that you know will engage the person you're caring for. That might be simple jigsaw puzzles, might be books that are appropriate. And by the way, when you plan activities, you want to plan them and gauge them according to stage and ability. So jigsaw puzzles, for example, your parent, the person you care for, may at one time in their lives may have loved doing those big multicolored 1,000-piece puzzles, but those are too difficult at this stage. And so you look for something that's simpler. Instead of a 1,000-piece puzzle, maybe a 500-piece puzzle where the pieces are bigger, the shapes are simpler, and the image that you're creating is simpler. So all of those go into a memory box. And maybe it's not a 500-piece puzzle, maybe it's a 100-piece puzzle where the pieces are a lot bigger. So you adjust through the progression to find activities that are appropriate for stage and ability. And you put those in some kind of a box, a shelf, whatever it might be, where you have them ready. So when the grandchildren are present, come to visit, whatever the arrangement is, you can pull them out. You're ready. Have them ready in advance. That's the value of a memory box. The books, again, the books may be simpler and get progressively simpler as time and stages of the disease progress. So
And-
let's look at question. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to share one other in that I, through the groups, found out about the grandpad and I have we have grandchildren that are 7 and 5, and my wife is still able to play checkers. And that has actually, they can play on it. That's actually is motivating for them to have that activity. And they love beating grandma, and she doesn't mind being beaten. So that was one I wouldn't have thought of. My older one can play chess, but my wife wouldn't be able to do that. But those, and there probably are, there may be some other things on the grandpad activities like that that would work.
So I've not heard of that before. I was writing that down. So is GrandPad an app
It
that
is it's a
tablet?
product. If you talk Kim, I've talked to Kim quite about. You know, I'd ask Kim because she's familiar. I learned about it in one of these groups. It's been a game changer for us.
That's
But
great, Jeff.
designed for older people. But that particularly that game playing, they weren't wanting to come and not know how to talk to grandma. They loved very soon they would say, "Can we play a game?" And we found that right now that's the appropriate game. And I'm going to have to look for one. We might have to go to tic-tac-toe or something like that
Mhm.
to base it. But at least it's been something that the kids are enjoying with their grandmother that's not limited currently.
That's so good, Jeff. That's really the key point. Find something that both ages enjoy. And when you do it together, the connection just brings a calm,
Enjoy.
peace, joy. Yeah. And so having those things ready, that's what a memory box is all about, is having them ready, things that are appropriate for the current stage and ability. So let's just look at this case study. Mia, age 10, loves her grandfather, but has started avoiding bringing friends over. Her grandfather repeats stories, forgets names, sometimes interrupts her conversations. Mia feels embarrassed and doesn't know how to explain what's happening. So, how can we help Mia? So, as we've already talked, number one is to acknowledge and understand her feelings. Help Mia understand dementia at a level she can understand, and that she can then explain to her friends. So, teach coping and boundary setting skills. I would say another way of saying that is model it, demonstrate it yourself, and that will help. And everything we do is helping Mia maintain the connection with the grandparent. So just briefly summarizing some do's and don'ts. To do, be honest, acknowledge, but keep explanations simple. Listen carefully. Allow time for this conversation with the grandchild. Listen to their questions. You know, listening is something we talk about in caregiver workshops as well. It is not easy to be a good listener. And the number one skill or habit we have to learn is to simply shut up. And this is true with children, but it's just as true, if not more important, when we're thinking about the communication with the person we care for. We need to allow time. We need to create an environment that facilitates a connection where we listen to the person with dementia, because they have frustrations, they have questions, they have fears, embarrassment. And we need to hear that. And they need to know that we hear them. It is so common for a person with dementia to feel nobody listens to me. Nobody takes the time to understand what I'm dealing with. And it is such a profound gift to anyone when we take the time to listen and acknowledge their feelings, their needs. How can we help? We don't know until we listen. Provide reassurance. Let them know that they are safe and loved. Again, I'm just struck by how applicable these principles are, both for grandchildren and for the person we care for in that relationship. Validate the feelings. Yeah, I get it. I have the same feelings. Acknowledge them. Keep the conversation open. It's not one time. It's an ongoing process. Some don'ts. Don't hide what's happening. Don't make up stories. Don't avoid it. Whenever I talk about this, I think of a man whose wife was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and he told me that he had decided he was never going to tell her what her diagnosis was. That just grieves me. When we acknowledge what's true, what's real, what the challenges are that we're facing, we are in so much a better place to find ways to adapt to the current reality. And when we avoid the current reality, we call that denial. And I understand psychologically, people need denial at some level to get through life. I hate to accept that I'm almost 73 and I can't do everything that I would like to do. I have some denial. The more we acknowledge what's real and accept that we need to adapt, the smoother and more enjoyable, the more joy there will be in our everyday. Don't use scary or confusing medical terms, especially with young children. Explain, but keep it simple. Again, I want to highly recommend the video. It's titled, "What is Alzheimer's Disease?" You can find it on our website. It's really, really helpful. Don't say, "Don't worry. Oh, no, it's nothing. No big deal." It is a big deal. It's real. Acknowledge it. Don't force children to visit or interact if they're uncomfortable. A person with dementia may act in ways that are scary, inappropriate. So we need to be observant. We need to be prepared to make changes. If a situation is not working, is not appropriate, if there's a risk at any level, then we need to make adjustments and understand where to draw boundary lines. Don't ignore emotional cues like fear, guilt, embarrassment. Acknowledge emotions. When we acknowledge emotions, I know I've already said this at least twice. I don't think I can overemphasize the importance of acknowledging emotions as part of listening, sharing, accepting and admitting that, yes, I feel these too. When we do that, we normalize it and we help them. We teach children, especially, how to regulate their own emotions. Okay, I got a chat message. Did somebody have a comment on chat? I'm not seeing it.
They just thanked you for the
Oh,
information.
there it is.
Signed off.
There it is. Okay, thank you. Got it. All right. So let me talk a little bit about resources, and we'll begin to wrap up here, and we'll be done shortly. There's so many resources, and again, at Alzheimer's Orange County, we want people to know about things that we can provide to provide support, and support groups are huge. I have attended support groups since probably the month that Judy was diagnosed, and the day that she was diagnosed, I can picture the scene in my mind. We're sitting across the table from a social worker who's giving us the results of all the testing that they had done, and their conclusion was diagnosis of probable Alzheimer's disease. And then she hands us a piece of paper that says, "Here, call this number and get into a support group." And that was Alzheimer's Orange County. And that was how we got connected with Alzheimer's Orange County. And we got into a support group. And even today, just this week, I was in a support group that I now lead, and continue, because there's so much power and benefit from being with other people who are walking the same road or have walked, as in my case. We provide comfort to others from the comfort that we have received. At Alzheimer's Orange County, we provide care consultations. I'll give you the helpline number in a moment. To be able to talk with one of our dementia specialists on the helpline, so valuable. Consultations for families, to do a family consultation, really powerful. Children's books. There are several books on Alzheimer's and dementia that are appropriate for children. The Alzheimer's Association, by the way, Alzheimer's Orange County is not affiliated with the Alzheimer's Association. We are a local independent nonprofit, as opposed to the Alzheimer's Association, which is a national organization. But the association has a tremendous amount of resources, and we recommend them as well. But their book, Helping Kids Understand Alzheimer's and Dementia, and of course, Atsuka and the family resources that they have developed. And here's a little bit from their website, and here's the web address that you can go to, and their ebook called Meet Josh, an interactive storybook. You can access that from their website, and another, Where the Ocean Meets the Shore, that tells the story of Josh and his family finding strength and connection after grandma moves in. So great resources. And again, we're grateful to the support of Atsuka. So let me pause here. I'll take a drink and see what other questions you have before we wrap up. Just a few minutes over our planned time, but if you have questions, I want to be sure you have the opportunity to ask. Well, if you think of something that you want to talk to somebody about, again, I would encourage you to check with our helpline, check out the resources that Otsuka has on their website. We are very grateful for their financial support for this and other programs. Here's our helpline. You can ask any question of our helpline, get emotional support, educational and resource referrals, and memory screening. If you or someone in your life is concerned about memory and not sure, you want to know if what you're experiencing is normal for your age, our helpline can schedule a memory screening. Takes about 30 minutes. We usually do it in person in our office in Irvine, but it can be done via Zoom. So I would encourage you to call the helpline 844-373-4400. You can also check out our Facebook page. Lots of great information on our Facebook page, facebook.com/ALZOC. And by the way, if you don't have a profile on Facebook, you can still go to our page. You don't need a Facebook login to go there for that public site. You can go to our website. As I mentioned, the video, What is Alzheimer's Disease, is on our website, alzoc.org. And then if you point your mouse to resources and information, you'll find What is Alzheimer's Disease in that 3-minute video, which is really, really great. And lots of other information on our website. So that is the end of our presentation. Let me stop sharing screen. Appreciate you all being with us today. We will follow up. I'll make sure that if the video is available, that you get notified. And let me just say, the work that you do in supporting family members, whether it's person you care for or young people that you're concerned about, that's such important work and a gift to the people you care about. So I hope what we've talked about today has been useful. We'll give you tools, we'll give you suggested language, ways to adapt to the challenges that you're facing, and give you hope. That's a big part of what we want to do at Alzheimer's Orange County, that you have hope and greater capacity to handle the challenges you're facing. So thank you for being with us. I hope
Thank you very
we'll
much.
hear from you, and I'll see you in another workshop.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
you.
My pleasure.